Hello. Let's see how the stream is working on YouTube. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Sunday stream. I am just busy ordering my screen around over here while everybody joins, and we'll get on with today. So we can move that like so. All right, that's good. I can see that the stream is working on my side. I think I'll close YouTube out now, and we'll get rid of this overlay as well because it doesn't seem to be working. Yes. Hello, Humbled Warrior. State of Awakening, hello. Hey, Marie. How you doing, Adrian? Okay. We got the chat over here on the side. Excited for today's conversation. Can you let me know in the chat how the sound is coming through, and also you can see me like well on the screen, right? Doing good. That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Just gonna move it over there. Excited for today's conversation. Sounds good. All right, that's magic. So, fantastic. All natural, Rebecca. A little low, but that's good. Loud and clear. The Panther process, thumbs up. Thanks for today. Absolutely. Cool. I can turn the sound up better over there. That might be better. Okay. So I'm excited for today's conversation. If you want, you can share the stream to other people that you want to have this content shared with. That's a good idea too. We're going to talk about evolutionary astrology and the nature of the soul, answer some questions that I think could be beneficial to you guys in the chat itself. Northwest Hypnosis Center, good, but a little low. Okay. I can adjust that a bit more on my side. Let's see, it says that. Okay, there we go. Akra, unfortunately, I won't be able to, I can't put chart details in for us today, but if you let me know, are you familiar with evolutionary astrology, Akra? Arca, there we go. Hi from London. Hello, hello. I'm in Sweden. Whereabouts is everybody else from? So like I said, just like getting the stream started at the moment. Some few people trickling in. For those of you that are going to be watching this after, as in it's not live, I'm going to be talking about evolutionary astrology, Uranus's entrance into Gemini for a bit, answering questions that we've got in the chat. Yeah, just overall hanging out. I need some career guidance. Gosh, that is a huge topic, especially when it comes to the fact that it's, your life in that sense. I could try to help you, but with very little information, I don't know how successful or I can be on that. Northwest, you're in Vancouver, or it's just south of Vancouver. Okay. Arena, you are from Athens in Greece. It is Mercury retrograde at the moment, so if I pronounce things in an odd way, I'm using the Mercury retrograde card. Hey Nancy, we've got somebody from Hampshire, northern New Hampshire, the States. Tennessee. Cool. Margaret Tracy from Ireland. Laurel, you're from Nevada, Montreal. Okay. So I thought I would just kind of get the conversation going today on evolutionary astrology. How many of you are familiar with evolutionary astrology? How many of you know about evolutionary astrology? Gina Wolf is from Oregon, Chicago, Nancy. Yes. Yeah, we definitely know, familiar with it. Advanced practitioner. Okay, that's cool. Maxine, you don't know anything about it. Okay, that's cool. So we've got some people that are familiar with it, practicing it. Okay. So what is evolutionary astrology? There are two main branches of EA. We've got one of the branches was pushed through and moved through by Jeffrey Wolf Green. He wrote two books called Pluto 1 and Pluto 2, which forms a very strong basis around the concept of evolutionary astrology. For me, one of the major reasons why I love using evolutionary astrology is because the way I like to see the world and the human condition is that we are in a state of constant change. And emotionally and psychologically, our human form is always engaging in the change that is moving through us as human beings. And so what evolutionary astrology does is it looks at the natal chart, right? The chart that you look at when you try to understand your transits. And it says, okay, well, this picture over here contains the principle of change, right? It contains the principle of change. Most people look at their charts. Most of you sometimes look at your charts and think that it's a static object, right? It's just like, oh, there's where my planets are, and we develop some personality understandings and traits and character quirks from what we read online, etc. I mean, I'm generalizing a lot here, but oftentimes we come into astrology and we see it as a two-dimensional object, our chart at least. But if you switch your perspective and begin to reframe it from the point of view of that, what you're actually seeing is an image of your internal evolutionary path, right? In other words, the arc of your life. And if you see it from this more dynamic and movement, like your chart is moving, right? Your life is moving, then you open up a broader and larger context for how your planets and the signs and how they're all operating. But it also gives you deeper dimensions into your own self-understanding. So what I like about EA particularly, or evolutionary astrology, and why it deeply appeals to me, is that when you read it and you start to see your life from these different nuances and layers, you start to recognize patterns in your experience, and you can start to integrate a lot of situations and circumstances and answer a lot of questions that begin with why. Like, why my parents? Why this social economic situation I was raised within? Why the conditioning patterns? Ranging, I mean, that's just a few to mention. There's many others. But it really brings you into a deep reflective state of self-understanding. And it gives you a lot more context for why experiences and scenarios have played out within your life. And I think one of the things that I like the most about it is that it offers an opportunity to process and integrate experiences so that you feel more whole within why your life has actually played out the way that it is. So I really, I advocate it for a lot. For those of you that have been following my channel for a very long time, like way back in 2014 almost, you'll know that evolutionary astrology is a big part of how myself and Jen actually practice here on Raising Vibrations. So I'm just going to drop into the chat quickly for a second and see. Oh, that's cool that some of you are new to it as well. I'm always excited to introduce evolutionary astrology into people's lives. I did mention that there were two kind of branches of EA. One was from Jeffrey Wolf Green's work. That is the EA that I lean towards and subscribe to. Stephen Forrest was another soul who pushed through evolutionary astrology and did a lot of great work around EA and what it means, etc. And so, those are the two people I would say that kind of picked up the movement. And Dane Rudyard actually was the person in my eyes that began the whole concept of looking at the astrology chart from the soul's perspective. So, hi, Christopher. Good to see you. Good to see you. So yes, what else about evolutionary astrology is pretty neat? If you take a look at your astrology chart and you study the nodes of the moon, you start to actually begin to understand how you have related to your past, like what types of themes have been in your past and why they were the way that they were. And if you look at your north node, which is, I'm trying to see if I can get a chart up that we can use. Let's see if this works over here. Okay, let me do this first. So I'm gonna get a chart so that I could show you guys on the screen. Give me a second. I've got one from, okay, so we can, in fact, I've got an idea. We'll just do this. Okay, so this was the chart that I used from the new moon. So this is the new moon's chart when it was a couple of days ago, two or 3 days ago, on Wednesday, wasn't it? So more than 2 days ago. But this, if you see on the screen over here, you can see an astrology chart. And I was saying the south and north nodes. So for those of you that are fresh and new to astrology and are unfamiliar what the nodes are, if you look at this chart over here, and I don't think the cursor actually works on it now, but if you look to the 1 o'clock position on the chart, you'll see there's the symbol of Mars, and then right next to it at 19, it's got a little 19 next to it in the sign of Virgo. That's the south node, okay? And the south node is often mistaken in generalized astrology as, you know, we sometimes associate it with, you know, the part of ourselves that we need to move away from, okay? And the north node, which is literally 180 degrees in opposition to the south node, right? So the south node sitting there at this 1 o'clock position, all the way down to the bottom of the chart at the 7 o'clock position, you'll see that the north node is there. So it's the same symbol, but this time sort of like standing on top of each other, right? You can see it right at the bottom there. It's in the sign of Pisces. So oftentimes we can look at the north node and say, that's where you should go, right? That's what you should do. I mean, it's a very generalized description, but for the most part, the nodes are seen like that. But in reality, and this is what evolutionary astrology does, it actually looks at these two symbols and it says, each of us has a very unique way of making sense of our lives. Okay, every one of us has a unique storyline, a unique evolutionary arc. For some of you that watch TV shows and follow films and character arcs in films and TV shows, think of the development of a character throughout a TV show or a film as the nodes, right? And our ability to be able to track the development of a person's life is seen through the nodes. It's a really cool and fascinating way of being able to actually dial in and connect to your lived experiences and how they've played out. So it's really fascinating, and there's so much nuance to it. And it brings the chart alive, right? It brings out story. It brings out the drama of your life. It brings out the dilemmas that you've had to face, etc. So just looking at the nodes itself, you can spend an hour talking to somebody about the nodes, and it can bring so much value to a person's life. And that's kind of like another way of how I like to look at charts is oftentimes when you see a chart like this, and when you've looked at your own chart, you think to yourself, wow, look at all of those aspects and those lines and these planets in these houses. And then sometimes your mind will say, well, there's no planets in the 9th and the 10th and the 11th and the 12th. That must mean something. And oftentimes we kind of like stack a lot of unknowns on top of each other. And eventually we arrive at a point where we're like, oh, what does this all mean? And while that can be valuable in one way, especially if you're maybe engaging in a conversation with somebody that's familiar with astrology and can help you make sense of things, oftentimes I actually encourage you to reduce the amount of what I call stack overflow, right? Where you stack so much of the unknowns on top of each other that your mind sort of starts to become lost in all of the intellectualization. And you start to look in places and answer questions in places that are actually a little bit detached from your lived experience. So simplifying the chart and bringing it down to very basic analysis can be actually pretty potent and provide a lot of value to your life, especially if you think about looking at your astrology chart and saying, okay, well, let me try to make sense of Uranus in the third house, like in this astrology chart over here, right? Right down at the bottom at the 5 o'clock position, you'll see Uranus sitting in the third house. I mean, there is so much to say about your lived experience of having Uranus in the third house. And what evolutionary astrology does is it also introduces a very strong and necessary state of awareness, which is, well, how have you actually lived out these experiences? What has been your personal relationship to that planet? How have you experienced and lived that? And starting there first. So there's this kind of switch from actually valuing less of the description of the planets and prioritizing more of the observation of how these themes have played out within your life and trying to connect you to that. And that's like a big mission of mine, and when it comes to the astrology, is trying to help you or help people who are interested in exploring their own lives in a way that is self-reflected and want to make sense of things. And you're using a tool like evolutionary astrology or astrology, that you want to be able to take your attention and try to connect it to your actual lived experiences, and from there work through and make sense, because you actually have all the resources and all the themes already embedded into you, because you have the story. The chart is just allowing us to almost like mirror what we are trying to discover within ourselves and make aware within ourselves. So, as I said, if you just look at, say, Uranus in the third house and you ignore all of the other aspects and lines for a moment, and you just spend an hour, well, not even an hour, but maybe 2 to 3 hours just talking or exploring or working through what Uranus in the third house themes have been for you, you can start to make it more personal, right? Start to make it connect with your personal experiences. It becomes personal. You start to see things like, with somebody with Uranus in the third house, as an example, will tend to feel, notice the keyword here, will tend to feel, so human experience, isolation or exile from their most immediate environment when it comes to their ideas. Okay? So what I've done here is I've brought into attention the human experience that is associated with the planet Uranus, which Uranus itself as an archetype has the element of exile built into it. Does anybody know why I actually make that statement? Do you guys know why Uranus has a correlation with exile? Just curious. In the chat. I can even type it in over here. Nope. What do you think could possibly be the reason why Uranus has a correlation to exile, or that Uranian planets in your life at some point you will have felt the experience of emotional exile or the emotional experience of isolation? And it doesn't have to be like massive isolation, like you're in a jail cell completely, although those experiences can be part of it, but just simply feeling, So you're thinking along the right lines, Faraven. It's ruled by Aquarius and is furthest away from the sun. In terms of like the physics of it, you're thinking along the right lines. Disassociation. Okay, Uranus decentralizes. That's right. I can see the people that have taken my evolutionary astrology programs. The Leo Aquarius theme is one of belonging and exile. Yeah. That's, again, thinking along the exact lines that I'm thinking. So how do we generally characterize the sign of Aquarius, right, or the sign of Uranus? How do we generally associate it? Like, we'll use the words like it's different or unique, etc. Gina Wolf, I do a lot of Aquarius. Okay, do you know a lot of Aquarius, and they who don't feel that they fit in, so they isolate themselves. Exactly. Why do you think that emotional effect takes place with the Aquarius signature? Because you're on the right track there. Fracture the structure. Exactly. On point. Hey, Amy. Good to see you. You have this, and it's definitely been your experience since childhood. That's right. So far, you guys are getting really like on point with where I'm going with this. So the reason why the Aquarius, why we will experience emotional isolation or alienation or exile, is because as we know, and many of you have already touched on it in the chat over there, so that's awesome. Thanks very much for participating, guys. Uranus as an archetype has to do with acceleration, okay? Decentralization and acceleration. So what do I mean when I say decentralize? If you think about it, the sun, often associated with Leo in the context of astrology, right? We would say that would be the center. So when you have your birthday, where is the attention? When it's your birthday, is the attention far away from you and there's nobody that's like they're bringing their attention to you, or is all the attention on you, right? For the most part, that's the idea, especially when you were growing up, right? Okay. So the sun being that centerpiece. So Uranus or Aquarius is the polarity to the sun. And just like somebody said earlier, that Aquarius archetype, Uranus is very far away from the sun. So we're talking about detachment. So the word is decentralize. Central, decentralize. So to break apart what was the center. So that's why Aquarius or Uranus, it's an archetype that reflects the phenomena of something breaking apart and moving away from the center. Okay? Now, in the context of the human experience, let's say you have, in this example over here, Uranus is sitting in the third house, and you have Uranus in the third house. Your perspective is going to have a natural decentralizing effect from the environment around you. Okay? So, in other words, here's what the status quo says. You know, everybody should wear Nike shoes. You come along with Uranus in the third, and you're like, my instinct, my impulse is to not be part of that centralized consensus idea. No, I want to wear Adidas. The mere fact that you will say, I want to wear Adidas, not always, but for most of the time, that Uranian component, it threatens the structure of what Saturn holds together. Okay, so Saturn is the archetype of the consensus, of everything that is held together. Think about the walls on your house. When you are sleeping at night, you don't want your walls to all of a sudden just decentralize. You want them to stay where they are so that you feel safe within the confines of your home. Okay? So as a natural, like immune response, when Uranus or Aquarius energy interacts with something that is held together by Saturnian principles, like a consensus idea, the consensus will feel threatened by it and say, no, that threatens that because it's unknown. It's something outside of the container. It rejects it, right? So an outside thought says, I belong here, or I want to belong over here. And so that separation in the human form often then gets internalized as I'm feeling unseen, or I am not part of the group. Like Amy said here, where she talked about, just having her experience of, not belonging, as it were. So with somebody with Uranus in the third house, the experience of, wow, my ideas challenge the status quo. And often I get rejection for those ideas, or I think differently, I think in other ways, right? Accelerates us into a different space. Uranus accelerates us into a different space so that we can see objectively what it is that we are part of, right? We can have distance. So the same thing happens, the same phenomena happens when we are in a relationship, for instance, or we have a friend that gives us insight into an experience, and often they'll say something like, I'm not part of it, right? I'm not emotionally invested in it, so I'm not blinded by that. That very concept, that very like expression, that very behavior is because anything that is distanced from the center is less likely to have a biased perspective. Okay? So Uranus is an archetype that decentralizes things, and it allows us to see things or understand things or comprehend things, or see it from a different point of view. Do you see what I've just did here? We've spent, I don't know, maybe 7 to 8 minutes on this conversation just talking about like Uranus and say the potential of Uranus in the third house. So let's say you have Uranus in the third house and you're exploring your chart. All of a sudden your eyes are opened to, wow, yeah, I do generally tend to have these types of thoughts, or yeah, I generally tend to think like this, and what I want to offer over here, if I just go back to the main screen, is that any of you that, well, not any of you, all of you will have Uranus somewhere in your astrology chart, right? Contemplate or think about the nature of decentralization. Why would you have Uranus in that house placement? What do you think you are trying to, what do you think your life is about in that placement that is moving you away from the consensus ideas that you might have been raised with? Okay? Where are you meant to be and think differently? Where are you meant to trailblaze? Where are you meant to allow objectivity to exist? And I wonder how many of you have successfully accepted your Uranus placement, and even though it can be painful, which I know it can be 100%, have you accepted that this is the part of the chart where oftentimes you might not actually be understood. You might not actually be recognized or seen in the way that you would like to be seen from those who don't understand it. Have you allowed yourself to say, yeah, this is where I actually am leading in a completely different direction. Here I am owning my differences over here. Okay, so I'll stop there. Let's check in with everybody at the moment. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, of course. I will happily talk about Pluto in the 5th house. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just the principle of Aquarius is, and I joke with this with my students, etc. But it's like, it's not here, it's over there, right? It's not over here. Uranus is not here, it's over there. So as soon as you arrive to that point where Uranus is, it all of a sudden does not become the moment where Uranus is, because Uranus is never here. It's always over there. It's not here, it's over there, which is a funny little thing. Hey Life Journey, welcome to the stream. You haven't fully understood Uranus on the ascendant with the Pluto conjunction. Okay. So I'm guessing you are Pluto Virgo generation, Nancy. Am I ready for an advanced transit question? Oof. Sure. I tell you what. Let's have a look. Let's do this. Let's go. I'm gonna go up the stream here. I try to get the chat feature on, but for some reason it's not showing up on the actual screen. I don't know how to get that to work on this software program, but I will investigate that and eventually get the actual chat on the screen so that you guys can read it at the same time. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, I'm just busy ordering my screen share again for some stuff. Okay. Let's just look where. I think I'll just start off with the question of 12th house, 5th house Pluto, and then I'll move over to your question around advanced transits. So somebody asked me about the Pluto in the 5th. Was that right? Okay. I'm going to get rid of that and make the chat longer so I can see. I know I read it here a second ago. Okay, State of Awakening. There we go. Pluto in the 5th house. Right. So Pluto in the 5th house. One of the best videos to watch is on my channel. It was like, it had to do, I can't remember the exact title of it because I did it, gosh, almost like 4 years ago. But it was understanding Pluto in your astrology charts. I've done a few of them. But in order to understand Pluto in the chart, again, from an EA perspective, emotionally and psychologically, you have to see Pluto as the planet that strips away your innocence and replaces it with life experience, and more so the ability to have resources within you that allows you to experience empowerment in your life. Okay? Pluto is the archetype that reveals where we are trading our emotional innocence and naivety of life for experiences that challenge us emotionally to grow. Okay? And that challenge to grow emotionally rewards us with resources that we didn't even know we needed, and it empowers us to have a perspective of emotional strength and maturation. Like that is one of my favorite ways of really expressing the Pluto experience. So if you come into your chart with an understanding that the location of your Pluto is here to help you become a stronger version of yourself, right? It's here to reveal to you where you're ready to emotionally grow, and challenge what you think you ideally would want with your life. So if Pluto sits in the 5th house of the chart, you're going to go through some deep internal emotional experiences, like deep emotional experiences that feel very raw and painful, that oftentimes can be difficult to accept around your sense of feeling seen, right? Your ability to internalize your own empowerment around self-verification, self-validation. That is the emotional arc that you're on. Like, who am I here to become? Right? What do I want to tell the world is a very strong Plutonian 5th house comment. What do I want to show the world? What do I want to tell the world? Right? What do I want to tell people that is something that's meaningful and real to me, that has purpose? And as I go along that road, I will be challenged by people that will not recognize it, that will not see it. And that challenge will bring you into a sense of, I wish they would validate me. I wish I was seen. And you have to reclaim that child in you that says, I need to be seen by people, rather than show us who you are, right? That's the Plutonian switch, is show us who you are. But you'll have to go through the experience of claiming that power within inside of yourself. So oftentimes people with Pluto in the 5th house can either grow up in homes where they have this creative experience, or this creativity, or this desire to want to show things and say, hey, look what I created. And your parents can't like really validate that for you. And so oftentimes you feel that sense of being unseen. Or it's the other way around, where there's so much pressure on you to actually shine and to be creative that you shy away from any potential of creativity because the pressure that comes along with that, especially if there's kind of a Saturn involved there. Okay. Go back to this over here, state of awakening. Yeah, that's right. That's cool. I have, okay, life journey. I will happily help you with that. Is there a specific question around the Pluto fifth house? How many of you have actually got Pluto in the fifth house over here? Okay. What's the question, the Panther process? Talk to me about advanced transit and give me some context from it as well. You have Pluto in the fifth house, Virgo. So for any of you that have got Virgo archetypes in your chart, like for me, for instance, I got Mars and Venus in Virgo. It's important for you to confront the perfectionist in you and to allow yourself to be okay with the imperfection. That's a very, very big Virgo experience. Like Virgo is a deeply somatic experience. Oftentimes we think of Virgo as very analytical. And in many ways, it's true that Virgo has this kind of detailed process. But in my eyes, the way that I like to emotionally work through Virgo experiences is to see your Virgo, the part of your Virgo in your chart that invites you to be okay and comfortable with imperfection. The more that you can be okay with imperfection, the more you actually come into a state of acceptance of how things actually naturally develop, rather than one-shotting everything and having the anxiety that if you don't get it right, you won't be loved or accepted or seen or mocked or shamed, etc. It's a deep process. Okay. All right, the Panther process. Share with me your question. All right, Margaret Chasey's got Pluto in fifth house, Leo. Somebody wrote, sorry to go back to the South Node topic, but if you have someone important to you whose sun is in the same sign as your South Node, what will that mean, if anything? Well, very generally, if you've got a synastry chart, right, and that person's sun sign lands in your South Node, oftentimes their like sense of vision about their life, right? The sun is about vision, right? Think about it. So I've got a light over there, and that light provides light onto me over here that gives you vision, right? It gives me vision. So the sun operates the same way in the chart. It's vision. It's like what we're here to see, what we're here to envision in our lives, etc. So if somebody's sun sign is landing on your South Node, part of their experience that you will probably recognize or note if we went deeper into it would be that they reveal a lot about your past. They oftentimes expose the parts of yourself that feel very familiar to the way that you were raised, the themes, the dilemmas, the issues that you might have had growing up, the challenges, the good things, etc. So it's very much about putting a spotlight on your past and being brought into awareness of that. Now, the real question is not so much, what does that mean there? It's more along the lines of like, why would you attract somebody into your life that has that signature? What are you emotionally evolving, right? Why is that signature brought into your life? What is that person trying to show you? And that's where sort of deeper contemplation comes in. Okay. So Pluto aspects the moon in Aquarius in the fifth house from the ascendant. Okay. Yeah, that can be a tough one. Somebody asked me question, Irina, can we talk about transiting Pluto and Aquarius in the second house, conjunct natal South Node? whenever Pluto transits the south node, essentially what you're going to be going through is Pluto expose that which has run its course. So any emotional fixations and attachments to things in your life that represent the past, Pluto will bring to the surface and systematically ask you to process, grieve, and let go of them. And depending on the resistance that you have towards those emotional fixations and attachments will dictate how that Pluto transit goes. So if it gets to a point where there's a deep unconscious resistance towards letting that emotionally be processed out and grieved and let go of, Pluto will create a set of experiences that will force you to eliminate it within your life. So Pluto South Node experiences are a period of a person's life of progressive elimination from that which is not part of your future. And the way that it's also important to note that when you're working with Pluto transits, that they and I talked about this before in Living the Shift, is that the contents, right, the actual the lived experience of your life, when Pluto transits come along, they bring a lot to the surface. So it's very difficult to try to kind of unwrap and untangle exactly what it is with the intent, with the mind intent, oh, I've got to do my Pluto transit, I've got to figure out my Pluto South Node transit. It's more like you have to go through the motions. And the way that I've experienced it and seen people experience it is there's a constant pressure that's just pushing consistently in your life that doesn't want to go away until eventually you start to address whatever that is. And the closer the Pluto transit comes to their specific planet or sign, or in your case, South Node, then that pressure will feel more real. It's whoa, it's really in your face. You can't ignore it. And it's you connecting to intuition and recognizing what is naturally showing up for you that feels emotionally real. Okay, that's the piece. That's the piece. Pluto transits are about becoming sober to our emotional attachments and fixations we have to things, and then allowing ourselves the peace to realize that this is no longer part of me. This is no longer the future version of myself. And so that pressure of that Pluto transit just brings the themes consistently closer and closer into your life. And then you feel that on an emotional level, okay, this is where I'm in a state of change. And it's a very kind of slow change with sometimes rapid endings, and then processing those endings or processing those cuts. So it's not something that we just kind of decide, okay, today this is how it is. It's more of a progressive opening up and realizing an acceptance, and then choosing a new way of being, and then choosing a new way of being, and choosing a new way of being. And then eventually it's oh, okay, wow, I look back and I can see how much I've emotionally let go of things that do not represent me anymore. And I can feel how much I'm valuing, prioritizing things that feel emotionally good for me. Did you see that emotional spectrum? What I'm just trying to describe here with Pluto transits. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about there? I felt like that was a great question that opened up some deep insight into working with Pluto in your life. Okay. I'm trying to get it concise because Box only allows short sentences, but be right back is a Virgo. I have Virgo. I have to Virgo the words. I love that. Oh my God. Yeah. And as you know, Irina, Aquarius is an archetype, right? It's very much about accelerating from where we feel limitations and stuckness. So notice where there are parts of you that feel dislocated, that you feel that you want to integrate within yourself and self-accept. And there are parts of you that you're saying, this is a limitation I'm ready to break free from. Okay? For everybody, Pluto transit in Aquarius is, where have I disconnected and dislocated myself and rejected the parts of me that are natural because of social taboos and judgments, etc. And I'm learning to accept them. And where am I learning to emotionally challenge where I have limitations and to kind of grow beyond those limitations, to cross the threshold. That's like the simplest psychological way to approach your Pluto transit, whatever house that's in. Okay. I'm trying my best here, peeps, to track the questions over here. All right. Progression question. I have Pluto Venus conjunction in a balsamic phase in the 12th house just before my ascendant in Scorpio. Okay. Do you want to add more to that, Amy? Was super painful and intense the last couple of years, I can imagine, but want to understand it more deeply. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about the first thing that I think about with Pluto balsamic to Venus, or Venus balsamic to Pluto, is that whatever it is that you've come into this lifetime with, there's been a very strong intention to, again, emotionally expose any relationship patterns that you have within yourself that do not align with your developing interests and desires about your life. So in order to answer this question, you have to think about that your life in the context of progression. And I know that we've talked about this lots in different ways, but I'm also speaking in a general way for anybody else that's listening to this and is curious about how to make sense of planets that are conjunct, especially from an evolutionary perspective, because we go, is the planet conjunct in a new phase, or is the planet conjunct in a balsamic phase? Just understanding those two things can be so super helpful for you. But in this case, balsamic phase, meaning closing, right? When we have a new moon, just before the new moon, we have the moon that is coming into a balsamic phase, right? The moon is just coming up to the sun, and then we go like, yay, it's a new moon, and then we have a new phase, a new start. Well, this is a closing phase. So when you have planets in closing phase, like in your case, Amy, the way that I think about it is like this. Firstly, you're born with that signature. So it tells us that there is something that is needing to be finished up in this lifetime before you can move ahead. Okay, there's something that is being finished up, and you must experience that in order to move ahead. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, when a conclusion or some form of ending takes place, there is a natural psychological rebirth that takes place in our psychology. There's a natural psychological and emotional rebirth that takes place. Now, oftentimes we generally experience that as a desire for something new that is different from where I've been or different from what I've done. That's how we can often kind of reframe it. So so that's why I said that the evolutionary intention is to culminate, to end off that cycle. And because it's Venus as an archetype is about our relating function. It's how we as human beings relate to each other. And each of us, all of us, have a context of how we relate to each other. And that is built based on priorities and values and our needs and then our conditioning. So if somebody has a very deep desire for security, that becomes a need, which then becomes a priority, that becomes the way that we will define things in our lives, right? We'll prioritize and say, in this situation, security is important to me. That's what I mean when I say relating function. So when you have Venus is balsamic to that, it means that that in this lifetime, there is exposing Pluto, leading to a confrontation of where and what your internal values are about, what your priorities are about, what are the things that you think are true and important, and how you want to live your life. You are in a conflict between what you may have been conditioned to believe That's the balsamic energy. And what you are trying to work through and expose and eliminate that is more authentic and real. So it's literally you against your own conditioning and trying to work through what actually feels true and real for you, and what conditioning or priorities or values are not part of your future life, right? And when I say future life, I don't mean like consistently looking into your future life now. I'm talking about now. Like, what do you want with your life? What do you want to experience and prioritize? And how does that become more of an importance? And how do you emotionally connect and commit to those priorities? That's the Pluto, how you would see that transit in the context of the chart. Does that make sense? And that goes for every one of you. Anyone that has got a Pluto transit that is in relationship to another planet, Pluto will expose what has come to the end, and it will say this is no longer part of what is right for you, and you'll feel that within yourself. You'll struggle to kind of like, not all the time, but you'll struggle to accept that or validate that there are two parts of you, one that feels different and like doesn't agree with things in life and don't want to live like that, and then there's this part of you that feels natural and free and wants to live more in accordance with how your life is. Like, that's Pluto wanting to bring this conflict into your life so that you could springboard yourself away from that which is old and allow yourself to grow and mature into a completely new way of living. I'm glad to hear that, SC. Take care, Christopher. Nancy, that's a tough one, you say. Simon, my goodness, yeah. I have Pluto in the 8th, Leo in the 8th house. I can definitely... I'm glad that helps, Amy. So think about it in the sense of, like, to simplify, just be like, what are the priorities? What are the things that I actually value and want in my life, especially in the context of relationships? And how do I begin to just prioritize those? How do I just say, this is what I want? And then begin to orientate your life like that and emotionally and zealously commit to that. Okay. Gina Wolf. Wow, that is amazing. Thank you so much for the $5 donation. I appreciate that a lot. That's amazing. I will happily answer the question that you've shared over there. So I will definitely do that. I will answer your question as soon as I've responded to the Panther process. This is a Pluto stream. Well, it's kind of like moved into a Pluto stream in one way, but I'm pretty diverse and open. I can talk about other stuff as well. I'm just thinking in terms of evolutionary astrology. Oftentimes, I think that there's a tremendous value in making sense of outer planets, particularly Pluto, Uranus, etc. Okay, so Panther process. Part 1. When Mercury Sun hit Lucifer. Okay, when Mercury Sun Mercury hit. So this was the transit, right? It hit your neonatal Lucifer. Okay. Okay, so this is 1st of August. Okay, you've written there to yours, so transiting. So transiting, okay. Now it's my turn to use my Virgo stuff. Your head is spinning. Well, no doubt. There is so much content there. Okay. So you have a Sun-Mercury conjunction in your natal chart, just like me, right? Which I can imagine means that you're just constantly sort of like, whoa, streaming information through your awareness all the time. Okay, it hit Lucifer. Okay, hit. Lucifer is also conjunct that, okay. Transiting Mars and South Node is in opposition. So these planets, the Sun Mercury is in Pisces. Okay. Transiting Leo train is conjunct my natal North Node and Venus invest in the 8th house, opposite South Node and Aquarius in the 2nd. Okay. So Mars North Node oppose. Your midheavens in Virgo. All right. I would love to see the chart though. That's the thing. I'm constructing it in my head at the moment. All right. No, when transit Mercury hits the sun. Okay. Yes, that's right. That's true. We're all mercurial backwards. Okay, transit sun. Gotcha. Okay. I'm gonna definitely answer your question, JC. 100%. I'm gonna respond to Panther Process, then Gina, and then I'm going to talk to yours. Okay. All right. I'm just busy ordering the information, and then I'll speak to it. So when you say the transiting Leo train is conjunct your natal North Node and Venus, invest in the 8th house, you mean as in like where this new moon was, right? I just want to clarify that because then I think that I've got a better sense of what's going on. Those are many archetypal layers that are at play. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. So what would you like to know? What would you like to know about the transits? Because the South Node, it sounds to me that the South Node is in your 10th house with your Virgo ascendant, or the 9th house. And maybe you even said that. Now my memory is already diminishing as we're talking. Okay. Transiting Mars South Node is opposed my transit, which is already trines my Leo. Okay. So it's probably in your 9th house, right? Yes, I can imagine how you can get lost with all those things because it's a huge activation. The way that I would think about it is like this. The fact that your North Node... Yep, okay. So if I understand it correctly, your Venus and your North Node is sitting in Leo in the 8th house, right? That's what I'm reading here. And thank you for everybody else that's bearing with us at the moment. At some point during this Mercury retrograde moment. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So it makes sense to me that Mercury is involved. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction, North Node's in your 3rd house, right? Okay. Yeah, just use whole sign. Let's just simplify it. Okay. It feels to me when I just think about the nodal axis and I think, so out of sheer curiosity, how do you find speaking up? Like how does that work for you when you tend to speak up about things, about your life, about anything? Do you struggle with a sense of vulnerability around validating who you are, because there's an underlying sense that there's a persecution or some belief system where you might be judged or criticized or persecuted, or just underlying have a sense of shame, right? That's where I'm going with this at the moment. Aha. Okay. Gotcha. Oof. Hmm. It's yeah, we did. I remember the conversation. Gosh. Yeah, that's because the thing that comes to my mind when I feel when I think about the archetypes here, because Mercury is involved, the sign of Leo is involved, the Venus archetype's involved, the eighth house is involved over here, and then these transits are activating it at the moment. It's like, it again, I don't know. Yeah, it just feels to me that this is a point where the soul has come to really examine eighth house, the underlying sense of self-worth and value that is that you, not you, but you have towards yourself and towards life. And there is a progressive alignment. There's like a necessary for an alignment between the things that you actually want to live and prioritize within your life, and to validate those things. And I know from the way that you've lived your life up until now, you've actually done those things. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, like, where in the context of that story does this exist for you? But it feels to me very strongly that this is, again, a very strong evolutionary necessity for continuing to take up space in a way that honors the values that are uniquely yours, and to devote your life to living out and validating and defining those value systems no matter what. The message is very strong around that North Node in the 8th house Leo with that Venus there. So even though the outside world or the surrounding world might not be able to understand the context of what you're strongly validating and advocating for, it's very much a path of self-acceptance around belief systems, and especially a type of truth or a set of truths that deeply, and like I'm like talking like deeply, validate North Node 8th house, your internal path of empowerment, right? Your internal sense of, oh, I value those things. I systematically gravitate towards that. That's the thing that I want to prioritize. That is a process that I feel is very strong with the signature. And I think that these transits that are happening right now is kind of pushing you to really examine, just like you did, examine what it is that might be. And part of that process is also having no idea what that is. That's how I think about it, at least. Exactly. And the Saturn Neptune is going back and forth, right? It's maddening. The thing about the Saturn retrograde over the Neptune, because I definitely can feel that in my own life, and I've seen other people struggle with it, is that Neptune Saturn conjunction is a illustration of stripping away the ideal behind the things that we, it's like that's what I've seen and I've experienced my own, where it's like, here's how I idealize this, right? I would want it to go this way, and then all of a sudden Saturn comes in, it's like, this is the actual truth. This is an emotional fixation. This is an emotional fixation that's revealing our addictions to things that we wouldn't consider an actual addiction, but in actual fact it is. So one of my own was like just this type of work in one way is an emotional addiction, because, and this is what the Saturn did for me in my third house, it revealed to me that while this is amazing and it's fun and I love it, etc., it can easily sway into disassociating from feeling deeper emotions within myself, or just sitting with the normalness of life. Because in this kind of a context, I love kind of interacting with people, I love sharing conversations, etc., answering questions. And then there's a part of me that goes, I can easily just kind of live out my life like this and not actually feel some of my deeper void or emptiness that can often come with a lot of Virgo planetary systems. So that's what I noticed with Saturn Neptune conjunction, is like, where might we still hold on to parts of our ideals that we have convinced ourselves, right, Neptune, that this is what we want, or this is what's good for us. And it's kind of stripping those things away and leaving us with emptiness. And it's in that emptiness that I feel we struggle, because we haven't spent a lot of time in that emptiness, because we've lived such busy lives of just creation and hustle and movement, etc. And we haven't been with the stillness of everyday reality, like Nietzsche talks about, right? Stare into the void and the void will stare back at you. It's like, okay. All right, I'm going to go to Gina's question. Again, thanks very much, Gina, for your generosity over there. I appreciate it a lot. Let's have a look. Could you speak to Pluto in the 8th house conjunct Juno, squaring my Venus in the 5th house? I've had a hard time understanding this. Okay, so immediately when you are dealing with these archetypes, it tells me that the way that you have been raised, okay, around what you saw relationships were, this may or may not, and probably has, hurt you, right? You haven't had any protection around feeling that sense of safety in the context of relationships. And it would have started off as a child seeing the emotional disempowerment or grief or sadness around how relationships were expressed. So as you were growing up, mom and dad would have had their emotional dilemmas and they were trying to figure things out. As somebody with Pluto in the 8th house conjunct Juno, you would have been incredibly attuned to, like, how do I relate to dad? How do I relate to mom? Or how do I relate to this caregiver, etc. So just your like underlying relationship to how people relate, how you relate, what you think is safe, what you think is a boundary, all of these types of things are this Pluto 8th house. It's like it's really exposing the underlying power balance in the context of relationships. And again, the context relationships being Juno, and then the 8th house being that double whammy of Plutonian exposure, like really getting to the bottom of it. And it would have been very difficult for you to have been told things growing up that you knew were not true, but you might have had people in your life that were not able to be as emotionally vulnerable or as deep or as real, but you would have craved that, you would have needed that. And I wonder, with the Venus in the 5th house, how many people were around you that validated that internal relationship to that need for authenticity or that need for depth or that need for emotional processing. And my curiosity would lead me to how much of that has been integrated. How much self-acceptance do you have about yourself? How much, what part of you do you disown? Because owning that means being emotionally real and honest and confrontational, that you probably wouldn't have had a lot of people come back at you and say, we value that, or we honor that, or we like that about you. Maybe a very few select people. So it comes down to this like sense of trust. So I'm going to drop that over there for you. No problems, Kira. I think that transit, like once that Saturn-Neptune conjunction moves away, I think it will be a lot easier. And then it's everybody, we're in a new start. The Pisces world is over. Okay, Pluto 8th house Scorpio with Venus in Leo. Yeah. So again, your Venus energy comes in and it's like, it's looking for that sense of recognition, that sense of, do you see me? And then you would have seen that, like, how does mom get validated in the relationship? How does dad get validated in the relationship? Or whoever it is that was raising you, right? You would have been very acute, aware of that. And then you would have learned what validation looked like. And that Pluto wants to kind of expose where anything that's unhealthy. Does that make sense? So your empowerment path is to first spend time accepting that you are here, that you're here, and you're going to be emotionally intense in relationships. And that a very big part of your sense of security and safety and how you meet your own emotional needs has to come from the transparency you have within yourself, and to own that. Be like, this is important for me. This is what's real for me. And then attract people into your life that value the same thing. And then when you can't come across people that are not able to drop into that level of depth or authenticity, all you do is you start to learn to just put a boundary in place and then progressively let people go into that depth if they can, if they're open for it. And you form relationships with people who you can begin to trust and who are ready to open up in the way that you open up. So it's like, if that person opens up, you open up. If you lead with opening up and they are okay to open up, then you do the same. And you just slowly kind of learn what is safety, what is not safety, where you can expose yourself for people that can trust and can have that level of depth. And you just own your creativity and your sense of validation. You don't seek it outside of yourself. Learn to do that, right? Learn to recover that part of you that's not, if that person doesn't see you, so that's okay, I see myself. And then that Pluto 8th house energy, like, I empower myself, yeah, right? Awesome. That is good to hear. And whatever resources you've gained as you've gone through that process, right? Whatever resources you've gained, through learning how to internalize your own stability and own empowerment, and to then open up to people that can do that for themselves. That's a big part of your wisdom and your gift. So like in the Evolutionary Astrology Immersion, which, by the way, guys, I don't know if I've told you about it, but the Evolutionary Astrology Immersion is the course or program we're going to be running, and it begins in September, and it's the entire evolutionary education that we're going to be doing for like 10 months. And I'm going to go through every single aspect of EA, and I'm going to teach it in a somatic way. Because that's the thing, like most of us, we learn astrology with the sky there, right? It's like there's the planets and we go into that space. Whereas the way that I want to teach, or I do teach it, is coming from the body first. Like what is the actual feeling of Scorpio, right? Can I notice the defensiveness in myself when I'm coming closer to something that feels vulnerable? Like that's Scorpio. And so we put like actual sensations towards the words, and we have a top down, bottom up process. So that's what I'm going to be teaching in this process through the entire education, from transits, retrogrades, everything. How you understand an opposition from a somatic perspective. Oftentimes when we learn astrology and we're learning like oppositions, like, oh yeah, it's 2 points that are trying to meet each other, etc. But what happens if I actually teach you the physics of an opposition? And then all of a sudden you take the physics of how an opposition works and you apply it to the 2 planets, and immediately you start to see it's not an actual intellectual quiz that you're trying to figure out. It's the sensation of what brings balance, right? You start to notice when your Neptune's pulling you, like in my case, as an example, when my moon is pulling me in the opposite direction, you start to feel that tug of war within your emotional body, and you're like, oh, okay, that's when I'm leaning more into my moon. And then now I'm leaning more into my Neptune at the moment. That's where I can feel that tension. What is leading me to lean more into the Neptune? And you start to feel your opposition in your chart, and you start to experience it in the way where you're actually living your astrology rather than just intellectualizing it. That's where the real power exists within this stuff. Okay. So I will leave a link, I think maybe even Jen's around, I'm not sure, but you can pop a link into the chat over there and go and check out the entire curriculum, etc. I'd love to take people and guide you through an entire process and teach your astrology in a way that completely revolutionizes your experience of it, so that you're actually engaging it. You're coming to your chart with less questions and more sensory inquiredness. Okay. All right. So let's go. I'm glad that was helpful for you, Gina. Appreciate it. Okay. There was another question that somebody was asking me earlier, so I'm going to go to that over there. I know you were somewhere. Mercury's in Leo, right? So I have to like break out into some song and dance. That'd be an odd thing. Just out of the random, just be like, oh, by the way, there's this secret life of me where I just sing and dance and do opera. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was JC. Yes. Can you, JC, if you're still with me, can you post your question and I will happily answer it for you? Okay. And yeah, I'd sneak into it. The upcoming eclipses. Yes. I haven't reflected on them yet, to be honest. But we've got some more lives coming up, so I'll definitely do that. Okay. So I think I'm going to quickly... I knew you were laughing there, Marie. All right. I want to see if I can find JC's question and answer that. Okay, keep going. I'm just scrolling through the chat here at the moment. It's the difference between whole sign and Placidius, if that makes sense. Okay, so based on that, I know that your question is above there. Hey, friend. A little bit downtime. Nope. Okay, I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom. JC, if you're still with us, post your question there. I'd be happy to respond it. Am I live somewhere else too? Nope, just on YouTube at the moment. I have the YouTube chat that you guys can see, the live chat. It's on my screen at the moment, so that's what I'm looking at. Okay. Somebody asked me a question about Saturn retrograde earlier. I'll happily respond to that. What is the key? Okay. What is the key to breaking free of Saturn retrograde natally in the first house, or not in the same sign as the ascendant? You experience a lot of isolation and delay in certain aspects of life. So, you know, peeps, again, this is something that's super important. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to YouTube quickly and access the link to the Evolutionary Astrology Immersion so you guys can check that out. And then I'm going to talk to you about Saturn retrograde and how to actually think about it in a way that's... Okay, just bear with me for 2 seconds, guys. Okay. Come on. Okay, found it. Here we go. Okay. Come learn with me in the immersion. Okay, so here's how, based on what I'm talking about, like immersion understanding, right? Saturn retrograde. Oftentimes we might interpret the limitations as a block, like this limitation, this slowness, this block that's in my way. Again, generalizing here, but the slowness of this block in the way, it's getting in my way, right? I don't want Saturn to get in my way. I don't want the blocks. I don't want the limitations. But it's like trying to get rid of the phone call feature in a telephone because it's annoying, right? It's taking out a feature that is built into the product and is the product's main feature, right? The telephone. So Saturn's feature is limitation. That's its fundamental, like its essence is it's slow energy. It's the phenomena of emotional growth in the human experience, but it is time. So wherever Saturn sits in our chart, it's literally saying to you, this is where the deepest emotional growth in your life is going to take place, and where you will spend most of your life contemplating your life decisions and choices, and also where your deepest wisdom can come from if you embrace my energy, right? As in Saturn. And so Saturn in the first house is implying that this is somebody that's really here to contemplate the nature of action. Like, what is this desire? What is this action I'm about to take? Where am I going, right? What choices am I making? And that limitation brings you into deep Saturnian state of contemplation and emotional processing, right? If you think about the lifespan of a tree or the lifespan of a flower or an animal in the human experience, how many of you want to go from like a baby to, say, 55 in an instant? I know this is a random thing, right? For the most part, we don't want that. We don't want that because you can get to the age of 55 and spontaneously just arrived from being like 9 months old, okay? You're 9 months old and you just spontaneously get to the age of 55. There's an entire gap of emotional growth, wisdom, and life experience that you will not have if you're automatically just at the age of 55. So Saturn says to us, hey, as we go, we're honoring the principle of time as it matures. So that limitation is saying, here's where your arc of emotional development will exist. Okay? So the limitation is, it's saying this is where you will see your development grow. That's one aspect of how to come into contact and meditation with your Neptune, with your Saturn placement. That's the first thing. And so because Saturnian energy is so slow, we experience it as real time. We experience it as real time, right? Your everyday life, your constraints. Now, a fun little fact, if you go and look at your astrology chart and you track the progressed moon, so the progressed moon, you will see that the progressed moon takes 28 years to go around your natal chart. How many years does it take for Saturn to arrive back to its natural place when you were born? Exactly the same, right? The progressed moon and Saturn actually move within the same time frame, and you can actually track the development of your Saturn through the progressed moon. It's such a cool thing to do. You can actually see in real time what you're going to emotionally develop in the next 2 years looking at your progressed moon, like whatever house and sign that's in, and also the location of the transiting Saturn. And when you put these two together, like this house placement and this moon placement, the progressed, you can actually see, oh, okay, I can see what it is that I'm emotionally developing for, say, the next 2.5 years. It's a pretty cool thing. So just that synchronicity of those two planets, the moon and Saturn, already tells you that Saturn as an archetype is the emotional development, moon sign, of your reality, Saturn, right? And that movement itself shows you exactly how your ego structure develops. And so, yeah, that just gives you a tremendous insight into understanding the context of Saturn and what its role is and how we can come into relationship with that signature. And then the even cooler question is, why do I have that Saturn placement in that part of my chart? What is it telling me about the overall story of my soul? Right? It's a very specific component that teaches you about the deeper developments that your soul has come to experience in this lifetime. You can just imagine what type of awareness you can actually have with that. Yeah, that's right. It becomes the Benjamin Button type shit. Yeah. Do you prefer questions about the outer planets? No, you can ask me questions on new ones. Yes. You can definitely simplify that process, then, Nancy. Okay. So again, Saturn in the first house is, I'm challenged by limitations. I'm challenged by things. Where am I slowing down? And what do I want to build with my life? To me, I feel that there are two placements in the Saturn chart, right? 10th house, like myself, and Saturn in the first house, that have very strong connections to the sentence, what do I want to build with my life? Right? Where do I want to go with my life? If you strip away all of the astrological terminology with Saturn in terms of career and etc., and you just bring it back down to what Saturn is as an archetype that's universal, right? That doesn't mean it's not just exclusive to human beings. And you just replace the idea of career, etc., with this. And you say, what do I want to build with my life? Then all of a sudden you're tapping into Saturn. Why? Because again, Saturn's the archetype that says you go out of your abode, as in home, 4th house, into a direction. And because Saturn correlates to the archetype of time, it says you cannot stay out of your house for 24 hours without the need to rest, to rejuvenate, to nurture. So, okay, oftentimes physically, other times just emotionally and mentally, otherwise we get burnout, right? So Saturn says we can walk out of our home and build something, and then at a certain point we are limited by our physical fatigue and exhaustion, and then we must stop, and then we must return back to place, to home, and then again we start again, and slowly but surely we start to implement a specific type of journey for us. So the question is, what do I want to build with my life? That's a more deeper, more honest, and more real contemplation around Saturn. What are my choices, Saturn, that allows me every single day to move in a direction that over a period of time will start to reveal something that I've built? Now, in today's context in Western societies, we call that a career, right? But the deeper question there is what am I building with my life? when I get to the end of it, when I look back, what have I built? What do I have to show? Okay. Happy to hear that, Shakti. Okay. That's right. Saturn in the first house can definitely have struggles with that. Okay. Somebody once said to me that the void course moon in the chart is like a Uranus planet, right? It's not, you're very Uranian in that nature. So you have 29-degree Scorpio void course in your natal chart. I would basically say that whatever traditional ideas of Scorpio experiences that you have, so trust, intimacy, expectations, anything that's got to do with Scorpio energy, whatever generalized consensus ideas are around you, like what people might say or how you emotionally relate to being understood with a moon in Scorpio, you probably feel even more misunderstood or different with that moon void course. And it's literally Uranian energy. It's like it doesn't have a container, that so it just kind of like everything's just unpredictable consistently. So it's like you're having Uranus conjunct your moon in that signature there. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's have a look. In a progressed chart, Saturn in the 12th house, Saturn in progressed chart, Saturn in the 12th house moon, first degree Aries. Please give me interpretation. Progressed Saturn is in your 12th house, is that right? And then, or is Saturn and it, I don't know, I think I'm reading wrong over here. I've got dark mode activated, so the black background and the white screen is making it difficult for my eyes to see, and I don't know how to change it. Okay. Uranus is square your moon. Yeah, don't try and fit in. That's all I can say to you with Uranus. You accept your unpredictableness. It's almost like an ADHD experience. In the progressed chart, right, Saturn in the 12th house moon, first degree Aries. Yeah, I can imagine to have Saturn in the first house. Like, hey, this is where I've defined myself as, but can we move a little bit faster? Singuda, help me out over here. Your progress chart, right? Saturn, where is Saturn? In the first house or the 12th house? Okay. I'm looking at the chat here for some more questions. Yay. Nancy, how do I navigate through Pluto transiting the 5th house with the moon in Aquarius, aspecting the ascendant in Libra with Uranus-Pluto conjunction? You say it's a tough one. How do I prepare? Well, the thing is, the question when you look at transits is, if I'm going to go through, especially an outer planetary transit like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the thing is, Pluto is not going to transit your 5th house again in your lifetime. Right? It's probably not going to transit your 8th house, maybe your 7th house, depending on how old you are. But Pluto will not go around your chart and hit other aspects. So the fact that it's coming into the 5th house at this time in your life for the period of time that it will, right? You have to ask yourself the question, what does the 5th house mean in the context of my life? So immediately the 5th house archetype is, do you see me? Right? My moon is in the 5th house along with my North Node. Do you see me? Right? Do you see me here? Am I on the center kind of like stage here? Right? Leo, presence, and then the chat, Aquarius. So if Pluto's transiting your 5th house, the questions around, are you actually visible, are going to come up for you. Are you actually showing up and following something that is a feeling of sense of purpose? And with its Pluto might actually expose the parts of you that are holding you back from actually seeing or experiencing or diving into a sense of creativity or a purpose that feels important for you. So you might go through phases of having to first adjust and take up space more and say, this is me, or this is who I am, and do things that actually feel fun and creative and lifelike for you. Think about the child and how it takes up space. So you're going to work through that type of stuff. Okay. I could answer this question. I'm Capricorn. I know all about Pluto. Yeah, that's right. You just had Pluto transit your sun sign. Okay. New moon, 5th house Leo, trining Chiron in the 1st. Feels like a new beginning and surrender to me. Letting go of old patterns. Rock and roll. That's exactly what that is. Wow, Cherie, I haven't seen you in ages. Hope you're doing well. Okay, thanks very much, Sakura. Progress charts. Saturn's in the 12th house Aquarius and the moon's in the 1st house. Oh, okay. So your transiting Saturn is that your progress Saturn is in the 12th, and the moon's in the 1st. So that would explain a lot of what's actually taking place in your life. Saturn literally through the 12th house. Saturn, reality, 12th house, decay, right? The decay of reality that is leading you into that Aries moment of completely being newborn, moon in the 1st house. Where do I go from here? Who am I? What is this new destination or life about? So you are literally experiencing the emotional moment that a child has as it separates from the mother's womb and comes into the world. Not only does the environment feel completely new to the baby's skin because it once was in this liquid fluid form, and now it's in this weird feeling sensation area. And think about what a mother needs to do for a child as soon as it comes into the world. It needs to protect it. It needs to nurture it. It needs to be there 24/7 paying attention to what has just arrived. So, and I know that's a difficult one at the moment because you're in it, but that's essentially what that transit's saying. It's like you're ready to burst into something completely new. That moon is saying you're aware emotionally that that's new. And Saturn is saying you're watching the end of a cycle take place at the same time. Okay. I am going to close up for today, peeps. It's been an hour and a half that I've been hanging out with you. It has been an incredible honor and deeply appreciated your attention and time. And I hope that you got something from this. I will definitely will be scheduling these call or these lives for the future. And it's something that I feel is pretty valuable. I'm assuming that's how you guys are feeling. And I'll definitely tune into the questions that you guys have shared over here as well. So thanks very much for joining. Again, just a reminder to the Evolutionary Astrology Immersion. For those of you that want to actually learn how to read your astrology chart in a way that's, just connecting to it, learning how your chart is built, how it's layered up. I'll teach you everything that you need to do in this course. So it's not just about learning astrology, about being part of a community that is also doing the same thing. And I think that's what's the coolest part, is that this is a group of people who we're going to learn together and grow together and share experiences and deeply commit and connect to your chart in a way that's very intimate. And that's, and it's an honor to be able to do that. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop the link over here. Go check it out at least and see how it is. And we're going to be starting in September. I know a lot of people have already done this before, but it has been an absolute pleasure to sit here with you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining, and make sure to check out on the channel for more of these lives that are coming up. And I agree with SC. Everybody asked great questions today. I felt it was such a cool opportunity to be able to talk about astrology and EA in a way that's real and impactful and can actually bring you into what this is about. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to learn EA, it's a great opportunity. Check out the immersion. It would be amazing to be able to walk with you and connect you to your chart in a way that's completely different. All right, everybody, I'm going to close up for today. Have an amazing week that's going to be coming up, and I'll see you in another live and another video. Bye, everybody.